Well, to the United States now, and Vice President Kamala Harris has spoken to her supporters for the first time since her election defeat to Republican Donald Trump. He staged a remarkable comeback to win the White House for a second time after surging to victory in a string of swing states. Harris accepted the loss at Howard University in Washington, D.C., where she originally planned to hold her election watch party on Tuesday.
My heart is full today. My heart is full today, full of gratitude for the trust you have placed in me, full of love for our country, and full of resolve. The outcome of this election is not what we wanted, not what we fought for, not what we voted for, but hear me when I say, the light of America's promise will always burn bright. As long as we never give up, and as long as we keep fighting. Now, I know folks are feeling and experiencing a range of emotions right now. I get it. But we must accept the results of this election. Earlier today, I spoke with President-elect Trump and congratulated him on his victory. I also told him that we will help him and his team with their transition, and that we will engage in a peaceful transfer of power.
DW Correspondent Janelle Dumalaon is at Howard University, where Kamala Harris gave that speech. Janelle, this is not the speech that Kamala Harris wanted to give. What stood out to you?
Yeah, Stephen. So an emotional Kamala Harris took the stage at Howard University. She thanked her supporters. She thanked President Biden. She launched one last broadside against Donald Trump by referencing that peaceful transfer of power. That's something we know that the president-elect has not always been such a fan of. But what really stood out to me was how similar her speech sounded to the 2016 concession speech of Hillary Clinton to the same man, to Donald Trump. Both women in their speeches reminded their supporters that the health of a constitutional democracy does not only depend on the government, but also on citizens' commitment to values like the rule of law, like fairness and dignity for all. Of course, however, there were some differences. If you remember, Hillary Clinton's famous line in his speech was directed at all the little girls. She was reminding them that they were powerful and valuable and deserving of every opportunity. For Kamala Harris's part, she directed her message at young people, saying it was okay to be disappointed, but in the end, it was going to be okay. She also reminded them that they too have power. Now, of course, it wasn't only young people who were present here at the concession speech today. It was a cross-section of society. We spoke to some of them to ask about their reactions to Kamala Harris's speech. Here is what some of them had to say.
I found it extremely moving, despite the circumstances, that she is still encouraging us to continue and not give up, and also not to be afraid of what's coming. I'm so happy that I got to hear her speak today and that she sounds so optimistic.
Outstanding. I mean, she's a remarkably galvanizing figure, and she was for, what are we on, about 70 million Americans in this election, and I think she should be really proud of that.
I'm emotional because of the promise that she had for all of us, not just people in the United States, but for people around the world. And it just hurts a little bit that we won't have the benefit of her leadership.
I also have to mention many people were openly crying here today. There was an entire range of emotions on display, from grief and despair, but also, as you heard there, of hope and of optimism.
Janelle, we know the Democrats are still trying to process what was an unexpected twist in this election. Did Harris give, however, any suggestion where her party goes from here?
I I don't know that she made any really concrete suggestions there, but what did strike me is that she took some of the features of her stump speech and also repurposed them into her concession speech. So she had this line that she would always take with her on the campaign trail, the "when we fight, we win" line. And this time she was saying, you know, sometimes when we fight, it can take a while, but eventually we will win. Now, I don't think she really meant that as advice for the Democrats. I think she meant that more as a general rallying cry. But in this time of the Democrats' deep identity crisis, these questions that they have to answer, who do they fight for? What do they fight for? And what will it take to win? In this moment of intense loss, those questions are existential for the party.
All right, that's DW's Janelle Dumalaon at Howard University in the U.S. Thanks, Janelle. All right, let's get more from Tamas Meszerics. He's head of the election observation mission from the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. He joins me now from Washington, D.C. Tamas, you observed the U.S. presidential election. There was a lot of speculation about how things would go, especially after new election laws and especially after more scrutiny after 2020 and the claims that Donald Trump in particular made. What is your assessment of how it went this year?
Thank you, first of all, for having me on this program. Indeed, there were all these speculations. What I can safely say is that these elections were managed professionally, first of all. And during election day, wherever we observed, it was peaceful, calm, and very effective. We did not observe significant issues with the election process. There were reports, obviously, for some minor malfunctioning of some of the machinery, but other than that, at this point, we can safely say that this was a very well managed election. As for the expectations, we ourselves did not form expectations with regard to this election. We never do that by the methodology that we employ. That would be misleading our efforts to observe. At the same time, of course, we were aware that a very large segment of the U.S. voters were convinced that the election process is somehow fundamentally at fault. This has never been proven. All the court cases about the previous election found these allegations as unfounded. And it seems that this was a very, very transparent and very, very clear election.
Okay, so just to be clear, we know that in the days before the election, there were numerous claims of voter fraud made on social media. Did you observe any evidence for any of these claims?
Nowhere we observed, we did not have any reports from our long-term observers or the short-term observers employed by the Parliamentary Assembly of OSCE for any malfeasance during the elections, not to mention direct election fraud. We do not have those observations. We have heard these allegations, but we treat them as allegations in our report.
Tamas, the U.S. is one big country with 50 different states. Each has their own election laws and their own processes for tallying votes, for counting them afterwards. How difficult does that make your job?
Well, we are prepared for all kinds of challenges. Obviously, one challenge in the United States is exactly the extreme decentralization of the jurisdictions concerning elections. This may be not very well known that there are 8,000 different jurisdictions that have a say on how actually elections are carried out, or the process and details of the process, which, of course, is not very easy to find out, first of all. However, having said that, in the U.S., the major advantage is that information relating to that is public and therefore available readily. It's just a very large amount of information that we need to collect in order to make our assessment.
We know that some states made very specific changes to their election, to their vote tallying processes, including in some cases requiring hand counts. What did that contribute to the overall security of the vote, if anything?
The changes which have been made, some of them are very close to election, are first of all because they might, in some cases, impact the legal stability and expectations, are contrary to actually commitments or the related commitments of the United States, but as far as security is concerned, I don't think they had any major impact. If it had an impact, it was more on the restriction of access to voting.
Did you see any differences between the electoral process in 2020, again, where there was so much skepticism, there was a lot of criticism afterwards, in particular from Republicans, and this year?
Well, this is, again, one of the methodological foundations of election observation, that we do not compare either across countries, we do not compare elections in one country to another, and we do not compare across time, exactly in order not to formulate in advance expectations that might mislead, actually, the observation completely. So I cannot comment directly on that. Obviously, there are trends which we sometimes are able to mention because they have an impact on the current election, but direct comparisons we do not make. We treat every election separate, and we assess them in its own merit, not in relation to previous elections.
You're an election observer. You're the head of an election observation team from the OSCE. You're very familiar with this job, have a lot of experience. How concerned are you going ahead, either when you look at the U.S. or other countries, that this kind of changing the rules around elections could become more prevalent to try and either favor one side or another or reduce access to elections? What do you see?
Again, we have a relatively clear good practice, international good practice, which we always refer to. And this requires that changes regarding election processes, especially voting rights, should be made well in advance of elections. Any country which has these and very close to elections are contravening at least the best practices, sometimes the direct or their commitments.
That's Tamas Meszerics from the OSCE Office for Democratic Institutions and Human Rights and head of the Election Observation Mission. Thank you.
Thank you very much.